In this video, I'm going to introduce the pen tool. I'm going to do this in Illustrator, but the pen tool is available in many of the Adobe programs. However, it doesn't always have the same purpose. In Illustrator and in InDesign, it's the key drawing tool. Knowing the pen tool is incredibly important for having full mastery of Adobe Illustrator. It gives you greater precision than drawing by hand ever will, and it's an expected skill for a professional. Looking at the toolbar, it might look like there are a few pen tools, but these are actually all ways of editing the main pen tool. So if I click on this one, the main pen tool, this is what we're going to use to draw with. This next one here is a curvature tool, which we are not going to talk about in this video. We're going to stick with the normal pen tool. And then this one here with the plus sign is the add anchor point tool. So we could use this after we've drawn with our regular pen tool to add points if we need more on our lines. So I'm going to go with just our normal pen tool. And to start out with, just like our other shapes, the shapes with the shape tools, all we are doing is creating points and lines. So if I click and just keep doing single clicks along, I will get points and lines. So I don't have any curves here, but the points are wherever I put them, and the lines just automatically connect in between. So as I get back here, this is the first sort of brand new concept. When I hover over the point where I started, you can see I get that little ring next to the pen tool icon. This tells me I'm going to close the path. So any shape that you're making, it's best practice and often required to get that shape to fill with a color that you fully close that path. So anytime you are drawing a shape, you should close the path. So I'll click here to close it, and now I've got my solid shape. So just to show you what might happen if it isn't fully filled in, is I'm going to give it a fill. And if I click off of that, we can see it's filled in all the way. It also still has a stroke. I could take that off if I want. And now I have my custom shape. So I'm going to Control Z a few times so I get back to this point. So I'm going to go back to my pen tool, and if I hover over this point here or this first one, you see I get that little slash. This tells me that I'm going to pick up that path, and then I can keep drawing. So it will continue this path I've got going. So I'll pick that path up, and then I can do some more points. So I'm going to end this path here, and I'll just tap the escape key, and I'll stop getting this sort of line preview. And now if I add a fill to this, you'll see that I have this spot where there isn't a stroke, and that's because I didn't close this path. So I could go back to my pen tool, and I tap the P key to get back there as a shortcut. I can pick up this path and then close it. So you saw the slash here and the closing circle there. So now I have a complete path. This is a properly made shape, and that's our first thing with the pen tool. We can also use the shift key to make sure our lines stay perfectly straight. So just like when we resize or move a shape, if I hold the shift key and then start clicking, I can only draw lines that are perfectly vertical, perfectly horizontal, or perfectly 45 degrees. So if I keep holding the shift key here, I can get a triangle. And I had to release the shift key because this isn't a perfect 45-degree angle at the top, which is fine. Now I've got my triangle. So holding the shift key will constrain the movement of the pen tool just like it will with moving other shapes. So let's say that I want to edit this. So I can go back and get my direct selection tool. So the direct selection tool is for, in the purposes of this video, editing anchor points. So I'm going to click off to the side so nothing is selected here, and when you hover over where there's a point, you can see it kind of shows up, the little box pops up to let you know that there's a point there. So if I do that along this line, doesn't happen, and when I'm on the point, I get the box that pops up. Now if you hover over a line, you see that next to your arrowhead there's that solid black box. It also happens when you're on a whole shape. So if you're in the middle of a shape, you can click and drag it just like you would with the normal selection tool. The bonus of the direct selection tool, though, is really getting at those points. So again, I'm going to click off to sort of deselect, and then I can click on one of those anchor point pop-up boxes, and then I can move these points and edit my shape. I can also do that over here on this shape. So this shape is now selected, and I have to click on one of those anchor points and make sure that's the only one that's selected. So I can tell it's selected because it's filled in as opposed to empty. So now that I have a filled in point, I can move, and then I can click and drag other anchor points as well. You can certainly select multiple anchor points. So I'm going to hold the Shift key and I'll click on these three, and then I'll release the Shift key. And now when I drag those, I'm getting all three anchor points are moving with my mouse. You can also do sort of the drag a rectangle selection method, and any anchor point that's inside the selection box will be selected. So if I do this, I'll get the tops of these little spikes, and I'll be only moving those top anchor points. I could drag this box a little bit bigger. See if I want to get that whole top section. I'm going to intentionally grab one that I don't want. So now I have all these anchor points selected, but I don't want to move this one. So again, I can hold the Shift key, click on this one, and it will remove it from the selection. Just like shift clicking can add to a selection, it can also remove. So now I have all these anchor points selected. I can grab any one and move them. The other thing that the pen tool can do, which is the really tough part of using the pen tool, is draw curves. So I'll go back to that pen tool, and before I was just clicking and releasing for every anchor point, and I got my straight lines. So to draw a curve, you need to click and drag. And you need to click and drag in the direction that you're drawing the shape. So I am right-handed, and I tend to draw shapes sort of around in this clockwise direction. So I'll usually start at the top or maybe the left side, and I tend to draw my way around this way. So if you are left-handed or just tend to prefer to draw in a counterclockwise manner, make sure that you're clicking and dragging in that direction and not to the right. So I'll try to do both. It might be a little rough when I go counterclockwise. So I'll start out simple. I'm going to click and drag. And you can see that I'm getting these two things that are called handles. And they have round ends instead of squares. So this is my point, and these two things on the sides are my handles. And then you can see that I'm going to have a curved line. So I'll click and drag here, and I'm click and drag here. And you can see I'm always dragging in the direction that I'm drawing. And to close it, I need to click and drag in order to define that closing point as being curved. I can't just connect it if I want that curve. And we can also, of course, combine the types of anchor points. So I could start by doing just a click and release. So that's a hard edge point, no curve to it. And then if I go directly below, and again, I am drawing in a clockwise way, I will click and draw towards the left. And then I can come to the top and simply click to close, and then I have a nice teardrop shape. The real skill in using the pen tool is getting accuracy, and you can also, again, use the Shift key to help you with the curves. So if I hold the shift key and click and drag, so again I'm going left to right because I'm still drawing clockwise, and I'll hold shift and click and drag a few more times, I can only drag those handles, as you might expect, perfectly horizontally, perfectly vertically, or at a 45-degree angle. So I'll keep doing them vertically or horizontally. And there I have a very organic circle, let's call it. Just as with hard points, you can edit curve points with the direct selection tool. So I'll click on this one, and then I'm going to come out here and grab one of those handles, and I can adjust the curve. What I see a lot with people learning the pen tool is that they want to put a lot of handle and have these very long, and then you just have too much line. The longer your handles, the longer your line, and the harder that line's going to be a nice gentle curve. You're always going to get these sort of blunt corners if your handles are too long. The other thing I'll see is people forgetting to draw in the correct direction, or they kind of switch directions partway through when they shouldn't. So I'm going to delete that shape there just to give myself some room. So if I'm going to start drawing a shape here with some like click and drag, let's say I do a little bit too much click and drag, and I'm going to add some shapes like this. And then say I want to end that. So this shape looks a bit distorted because I've got this really long handle here, and there's no point at the bottom here. So this is going to be very hard to edit, and you can squish this around as much as you want, and you can play with the top of it. You're not going to be able to control this one because you've got this super long handle on the side. You want to aim to have your points at sort of the tops of your mountains and the bottoms of your valleys. Like anywhere your curve is going to change, you should have a point. So you don't want to have too many points, and you don't want to have too few. So this would be sort of a too few circumstance where I'm not going to be able to really edit that curve because I've just got that one point that's controlling most of this shape. So this point over here isn't really on the change of a curve either, but it could be. So I'm going to say, well, I want to edit the shape to look more like this. And to get more control over these areas, I can add a point. So I'm going to go to this Add Anchor Point tool, and I'm just going to click on these sort of bottoms of valleys part. And now with points there, I have a lot more control over what that path is doing. So again, aim for tops of mountains, bottoms of valleys. If I wanted this one to be more pointy, that means that I have too much handle. So I'll pull that handle in, and now I've got a much thinner and tighter curve there. So to demonstrate drawing from the other direction, right to left to start out if I'm going to curve downward. So one thing I'll see people do, so this is basically just the mirror image of what I was doing before, is their brain will sort of like switch up on them, and then they drag the point the other way. So I had been going counterclockwise, and now this point is dragged clockwise. And you can see I get this weird little hook in there, and that's going to be very hard to work with unless your intent is to continue on like this. So I'm just going to undo a few steps there. So if I drew this and was like, oh gosh, well, I was going to close this shape, I can go, I get that circle, I close the shape as I should, and now I've got this little sort of loop on the end. This is another thing I see a lot when students are trying to figure out which drawing direction they're most comfortable with on the computer. There's not a right answer. You just need to get used to that direction or apply the right one for what you're drawing and avoid these little things. So You do not have to delete this or, hit undo, pick up where you were. Just go get that direct selection tool, select that point that went a little bit wacky, and just rotate the handles. And now everything's going in the correct direction. So I can make these handles smaller so I have more shape control. I could tilt them a little bit more to edit the shape. And now I am back on track. So you may be in the situation where different shapes you feel comfortable drawing in different directions. That's absolutely fine. Just make sure that as you draw your way around the shape, or if you start from the bottom, really think, are you going clockwise or are you going counterclockwise? And make sure you keep clicking and dragging in that direction. Try to avoid switching in the middle of a shape. So we'll get on to some more detailed exercises in the next video on using the pen tool.